You are listening to E-Radio Show by Missed Apex. We are electric. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the E-Radio Show, brought to you by the Missed Apex podcast. Today's episode is called The First Rule of Motorsport. I'm Matt Trumpets, and today I'm joined by Chris_Journo Stevens, who has a website. How's it going, Mr. Stevens?
It's going grand, Matt. And can I say how lovely you're looking with that fresh graphics package around you?
Oh, that's okay. I just made Steve's life miserable by forgetting to remove the car before you started talking. So my apologies, but sometimes you just have to be a problem for people. But you are not the only person who's on the show. But before we get on to the rest of our guests, I need to tell everyone we are an independent podcast produced in the podcasting shed with the kind permission of our better halves, bringing you race reviews, news from the paddock, and tech analysis. And we live stream our race reviews, so be sure to subscribe to E-Radio Show on YouTube so you get a notification when we go live, so you can join our live chat room as well. Our special guest today is none other than eRacing Magazine's very own Rob Watts. Rob, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for spending some time with us today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All right, so shall we get right into it, gentlemen? We had a race this weekend, and it was, well, full of all sorts of mishaps, misadventures, and great racing, which is everything we've come to expect from Formula E. So why don't you start us off and tell us a little bit about what happened in qualifying?
Qualifying was pretty unusual in that there was a collision in the pit lane after group qualifying. Tom Dillman's brakes, unfortunately, were cooked. And a brake failure. I mean, he went into the back of Robin Fraintz, who then hit his teammate Sam Bird. For those of you who are watching qualifying, Nicky Shields was talking to Lucas Di Grassi at the time when suddenly there was this big crunch behind them. And of course, they don't have cameras in the pit lane for qualifying because what's the point really? They're not going to film them coming back in. So the incident wasn't caught on camera, but one of the LAT images photographers managed to capture the exact moment where Fraintz was way up on his front two wheels when he got rear-ended by Dillman. But of course, that meant that Bird had to go into Superpole with a damaged diffuser. And despite that, still managed to take pole position, which was just astonishing, really. Especially when you consider he had a water pump change right before qualifying as well. Rob, I don't know if you thought anything else on that, but I thought that was a cracking lap.
Yeah, I think it's probably up there with Sam's best ever Formula E qualifying lap. We've seen some really special ones for him, but I mean, that just seemed to be, under pressure. He hit every apex. He was pushing, really aggressive. It was an absolutely superb lap.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but it seems like to me Sam perhaps does better when he has car damage. Or is this just wishful thinking on my part?
When he doesn't have a decent handling car, he pulls it out of the bag, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's really given some special performances there. But let's go on. We had actual qualifying. So who did we wind up with coming out and setting up for the grid?
Well, the big battle we were really looking forward to was Bird and Verne on the front row, and they've had some good ding-dongs in the past, of course, so it was a real mouth-watering prospect having those two on the front row of the grid.
Yeah, I think that was a really exciting prospect, but as we've seen with those guys before, when they were teammates, they're not afraid of mixing it and getting all touchy-feely when they get into a corner, and that was exciting. But as we went on to see, it didn't go according to plan.
That takes care of qualifying. So, Chris, why don't you start off by telling us where you think the race was won and lost?
The big thing at the start has got to be John-Eric Verne clattering into the side of Sam Bird into turn one. And do you know what? He fully admitted that might be the stupidest thing he's ever done in Formula E. And to be fair to him, I don't remember. He doesn't remember the last time he made a mistake. I don't really remember the last time he made a mistake either. But you'd have to say he had a brilliant shot of winning this race that was gone immediately.
Yeah, I wanted to say that he's more than welcome to join our hopelessly amateur sim racing on Mr. Apex at iRacing, because boy, would he fit right in there. Anyway, Rob, what was your take on that incident? Was this, I mean, have we had any explanation other than oops, I goofed?
Yeah, I actually spoke to Jev after the race, and he actually was very honest in his assessment of it. He said, I completely messed up. He didn't use that word, but he was, he totally accepted it. It was his mistake. I said, was there a problem with the brakes or anything like that? He said, no, I just got too ambitious. To his credit, though, he recovered really well from that.
Yeah, I think he was a bit more colourful with you in his language than he was with with me. And I think the reason he spun it was because he was trying to avoid hitting Sam. He did make a little bit of contact with him anyway, but got a small bit of damage from that. But he was saying that I didn't want to completely take him out and end up with a 10-place grid penalty for Santiago. The aftermath of this was incredible because so many cars got affected by it. You had Buemi and the two Jaguars running wide to avoid them and dropping back so many places. In the midst of all that, Degrassi rear ends Pascal Wehrlein, who then goes into the Jaguars himself, and they get damaged. So there was a huge knock-on effect of all. Oh, and of course the HWA is coming together as well because of all this.
So that kind of set the theme early for what we were going to see later in the race, then, didn't it?
Yeah, that first corner was kind of a bit chaotic, but and in a way it was a shame there was a couple of guys that got either taken out or punted off and had to sort of recover, because there were some guys as exciting as it was to see Jev coming through the field, we still haven't actually seen the Techeetahs run at the front yet. So I think that's something that I think everyone's really eager to see.
Yeah,
definitely, especially now that we know, why their braking system is so good. Apparently, it's from their braking system from an old Citroen rally car back from 2003 and 2004, and that back when ABS was still allowed, and they've been using the same software from that for their brake-by-wire systems for this DS Techeetah car, and they're one of only two teams who are believed to have done their own software for the brake-by-wire. Although they'll say that this is not the only reason why their car is so quick, it does help.
So let me get this straight. You're saying they took the brake system from a 2002-2003 Citroen rally car and they've adapted it and written the software to make it work as a brake-by-wire system?
The software from that system in that car, yeah.
Fascinating. But I mean, is there any any doubt that the DS team can run at the front? I mean, look at how far back he came from. It didn't seem to me that there were any major efficiency or power issues coming from back there.
This is the thing, actually, because I said to Jev, what's your opinion on BMW's pace? Do you think they've got an advantage? And he said, what advantage? I don't see an advantage, because he says that, he was, as he points out, he was at the rear of the field and he ended up finishing fifth, and he recovered, I don't know how many seconds it was, but in terms of his race pace, he doesn't believe that BMW have an advantage at all. In his eyes, it's simply because they haven't had a clean run at the front, and he may well be correct. We may see in Santiago that Techeetah actually are, the outright quickest. We just haven't really had the chance to see that in race trim yet.
So I have a question for you. It's only been 2 races, but Vern is the reigning champion. If this run of luck continues, how long do you think it will be before the pressure starts to build for them to produce a proper finish? Or am I forgetting something?
Well, Jev has already told me that the team has used up its jokers in terms of errors that it can make, because, of course, in Adiria, they both ended up with drive-through penalties. That was on the team. In Marrakesh, both drivers made mistakes that cost them big time potential win. So and you'd have to say that's 2 in, 2 down.
You say that, though, but his results this season are actually identical to the results he had in the first 2 races of last season.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. That's an interesting point, but I think there's. Do you not get the feeling things are a little bit more competitive now, and the fact that we have the Gen 2 car and so many guys are yet to reach their potential, there's going to be so many guys that are coming forward a lot quicker. Whereas I think actually last season we saw towards the end of the season things get a little bit samey.
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I think he will need to start winning because, like for example, last season, Audi's recovery, we're unlikely to see something like that this season because, the pace at the front is really hot and there are a number of teams that have really stepped up. But I think we've potentially got, 2 or 3 genuine title challenges this season.
And DS Techeetah are still leading the team's championship, but that's really only because they've had both their cars finishing the points in both races, in decent positions. Audi haven't had a proper crack at it yet. Virgin didn't score points. BMW have only scored points with 1 car in both races. So have Mahindra. So that's probably why they're in that position at the moment. It's going to be all change as we go through. It's going to really, really toss and turn.
Yeah, well, it just seems like to me that his results at the beginning of last season were optimal for what they might have expected, and then they went on to improve on it. Whereas this year, you can look at how the car is doing and say, okay, we've thrown away 4 places in the first race. We've probably thrown away the same amount in the second race. And if we think about what it was like in Brooklyn last year, that's the kind of thing that will be talked about when we get to that weekend.
Well, no one expected Techeetah to be a kind of championship contender last season, really, did they? No, the customer team. Everyone thought if it was going to be any Renault team, it was going to be the Edams and it was going to be the Audis that were going for it. It was all very unexpected. Whereas there's been quite a lot of anticipation for Techeetah becoming a manufacturer team. So you almost would have expected a little more from them. But again. That's a team that need to get everything right in terms of its race weekend, because I think inherently the car is just fine.
One other thing which is probably worth thinking about this season, if you consider we've got Techeetah, we've got BMW, and at the moment you could say Virgin are in the mix. I don't think Mahindra are really in the hunt for a title, and I think Audi are maybe too far behind. Whoever wins the driver's title, it might actually come down to who has the strongest teammate this season, because I think Jev with Lotta as a teammate this season, I think he's going to be really strong this season, and I think in terms of his ability to protect Jev and take points away from some of his rivals, I think that's going to make a difference.
That's a really good point, actually, but you would also have to say BMW are in a similarly healthy position because both of their guys are really, really competitive. Especially, Sims for a rookie is fantastic and arguably at times quicker than Antonio. So that's going to be a really, really strong thing. I hugely disagree with you about Mahindra not being a contender because I think maybe in Adiria there was a question mark over it, but the way he was able to come through, the way he drove in Marrakesh was just sublime. Yeah, he got a little bit of a helping hand with the BMWs taking each other out. But at bare minimum, I reckon that would have been 2 third places in a row.
Maybe. Okay, maybe. I'll give you that. But, what we found last season, on their day, Mahindra was superb. And, when they were able to hook it up, they could win races. They could get pole positions. But they had that period last season where they lost their way on setup and just things weren't going right for them. And I just don't feel like they've got the infrastructure as the other teams do to really put together a whole season, and mount that challenge.
Right. And they are, I guess it's the same kind of split that we see in Formula One. They're capable of a podium on a good day, but do they really have the same kind of resources Audi and BMW and I guess even DS to run operationally the kind of team that would let them vie? Because we haven't seen them, we haven't seen them with quite the same kind of pace as we've seen those teams have.
Well, the thing you got to remember is it's a Campos run team. When you compare it to Cheetah, is very, very similar in that it's a race team that's partnered up with a manufacturer. So in Mahindra's case, it's Campos Run with parts supplied by Magneti Marelli for the powertrain. In Techeetah's case, it's a Techeetah Run team with DS parts. So in terms of that aspect, they're quite similar teams in terms of the basic blueprint of them. It's when you start looking at the likes of Audi that have got the works team and are doing everything in-house, that you start to look at the advantages that people might have. But even then, Audi aren't putting things together. What's going to define this championship is who manages to get on top of the car, how to optimize it fully, and get everything out of it on a regular basis.
One of the other things as well, with regards to the teams at the front and who can develop and who can stay in the race, all the way through. I spoke to Mark Preston in Valencia testing, and he said to me that the impact of partnering with Techeetah is hugely significant, because he likened it to the difference between a Formula E team and a Formula One team. He said they're able to get access to stuff and they're able to turn things around quicker and test things that they weren't able to do last season. And look what they did last season as well. I know it was a bit of an unusual season, but I wouldn't be surprised if Techeetah do it again this year.
No, I wouldn't at all either. What they were able to do last season, just adding on top the extra income and resource and infrastructure that DS bring along with them is absolutely fair enough. And we know that Mark is a guy who loves his testing. So getting an extra 15 days of that is going to, made him very happy.
I can understand that. So let me ask a sideways question. You mentioned HWA basically taking themselves out again. At what point is the lack of running in a race really going to hamper their development scheme? And they had some special guests around, didn't they?
Yeah, it's bad for them, really. It was really unfortunate because there was a lot of chaos at the start, a bit of smoke. People couldn't really see where they were going. Van Dorn just kind of turned into the corner and suddenly Paffat's right in front of him and rather clatters into the side of him, which is just really, really unfortunate. And they were both too damaged to continue. So to answer your question, I think at some point, yeah, it is going to hurt them. They haven't properly finished a race competitively yet. They've had 3 DNFs in 2 races between their 2 drivers, and even then Van Dorn's finish in Addiria was hampered because he dinked the wall as well, and that's why he ended up in 17th. So they haven't really seen a race properly pan out for them. So in Santiago, that's going to be a brand new experience, especially when they're up against guys who have done every race as well. That is. I
think what's interesting on HWA is Gary Paffett. His quote was quite telling after the race. He said, "We knew it was going to be hard, but we didn't expect it to be this hard." And I think that just goes to show how competitive Formula E is now. Even guys like HWA have had so much success in other championships, and they won DTM. They've come into Formula E, and it's really difficult to get up and running and be competitive in your first season.
Yeah, and bearing in mind they are using the Venturi powertrain, which around this circuit wasn't very competitive, especially in race trim, because that powertrain lacks efficiency compared to some of the other cars, and this is probably one of the most efficiency-dependent tracks that we go to. And throw on top all the issues they had in qualifying, where pretty much every Venturi-powered car, so the HWAs and the Works Venturis, had motor issues throughout the weekend. Massa had to have a complete powertrain change on his car before qualifying. So it's a good job he was in Group 4, otherwise he might not have made it. And there were other issues because Van Dorn had his car shut down in qualifying. He has still having his F1 luck, it seems. There have been multiple issues that are not, necessarily driver related or team related. A lot of it points to it being hardware related. And even when things are going to start going right for them, HWA are going to make mistakes because they don't know what the right or wrong thing is compared to a team like Techeetah or Audi or Andretti, because they haven't been around. And there's nothing wrong with that, because they've only done 2 races and they've not even really managed to cover a race distance competitively yet.
All right, let me follow up on that. Then we saw BMW come in with Andrade this year, full force, and show up and be on it after they had, well, rather not the best of years last year. Are you getting this sense yet that Mercedes might have bitten off more than it could chew? Or do you think that they will be able to show up and be on pace? Because they certainly have the resource, but when BMW showed up this year, now they're going to be Audi, BMW, DS clearly on it for them to compete with. So it seems like the competition's only going to be stronger, and it's just going to be that much harder for them next season.
It is going to be hard, yeah, but I think they've done the right thing in getting a team to learn how to run a Formula E team first before coming in with the hardware. Because we see Jaguar really, really struggle in their first season, for example, and then came on really, really strong in the second season. But then operationally, there has still been a lot of mistakes there from time to time. Errors from the drivers. There's been a lot of things that have plagued Jaguar. BMW came in because they decided a long time ago we want to enter Formula E and this is when we want to do it, and they've basically been working on it for that long. Mercedes have that advantage as well. And we'll probably have a good 18 months of development, maybe even 2 years before that powertrain actually, kicks into action in the first race of season 6, with a team that will already have a season of Formula E racing under its belt as well. Yeah, it's going to be really difficult to compete with those guys, but I wouldn't be at all surprised to see them at the sharper end of the field. Maybe not, fighting for race wins right away, because we're even seeing, Nissan come in on the first season and struggle a little bit, but they'll definitely be in the hunt.
Yeah, that's correct. What Chris says there, about that long-term approach. Because Da Costa, I spoke to him on the Thursday, and I actually asked him about the long-term plan with BMW, and he said that this isn't just like they've come in the last 12 months and suddenly it's just blown up. He said they've been working towards this and targeting season 5. For quite some time, and BMW have been inside that team for a while. They haven't just rocked up in Algeria. So I think it's that long-term approach that the manufacturers take is the correct one, and HWA are going to go through some tough times this year, but it'll pay off, I think, eventually.
Antonio's so much happier now, isn't he?
You'd expect it to be.
Well, yeah, but you just saw he was exhausted by the end of last season, having to try all these things and try and improve the car, and it makes it worse for some reason, and it was draining him. It really was. So yeah, the fact that BMW have finally come in with the full works approach, having embedded their guys in the team and developed that powertrain for such a long time, he's just so much happier.
All right. Well, we're talking about BMW. Is it maybe time to get back to the race?
Probably. This is a really great segue, because he was happy right up until that lap.
Tell us what happened.
Where to start? When you're leading a comfortable 1-2 finish, and suddenly the rookie in second place looks an awful lot quicker, despite the fact that he's trying to save energy compared to Antonio. So he has a go, and rightly so, because how in his second race he's able to match somebody who has been in nearly every Formula E race. I think he's missed a couple for other races, hasn't he? But somebody who is well versed in Formula E, a double E-Prix winner, of course. So yeah, he has a go, and unfortunately they both lock up, and I think Antonio was probably more to blame in this instance, because he was the one going properly, straight on and blocking Sims, and put Sims out wide a little bit. It was not quite 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Maybe it was 60-40. But both drivers have got to hold their hands up and accept responsibility for what happened in that situation. I think the images of him just kind of staring at his car afterwards, just kind of tells the story in itself, really. And it was such a shame because he wasn't just sad for himself. He was sad about the fact that he cost the team a 1-2 finish. He said, even if I'd made the mistake by myself, Alex still would have gotten P2. Instead, we've cost them a 1-2 finish, and I got to say, the team handled it with absolute class. Every single person took responsibility for what happened and why that situation was allowed to happen, not just how it played out. And they will handle things very, very differently in the future.
Yeah, it's a thing, but you can understand it's one of those rare instances where I think it's right on reflection, especially because DaCosta admitted it. I mean, it was his fault. He was being overtaken. It was too late for him to really defend the position, and and I've had it happen too. Like, you get distracted and lose your braking point, and then it is literally all over for the both of them. Although I don't know if you had any further discussions with him about the nuts and bolts of what happened there. But it was a real shame for the Andretti team and for BMW because they were really very untouchable in this race.
I'm going to add Rob back to the call. Yeah, untouchable is a word I would use. Of course, we didn't see what Techeetah could bring to the table. But certainly in the scenario we were given, they were just pulling away from the field. They were even using attack mode strategically together to pull away from the field. And it worked really, really well. And yeah, definitely a 1-2 was lost in this race. Alex mentioned as well that, he doesn't have any hard feelings about it towards Antonio. They're still good friends. There's no breakdown in their relationship. Breakdown is the word he actually used as well. So everything is fine. Whether that now means there's a no racing rule for the rest of this season, I'd be surprised if they let it get to that, but they will handle things differently.
Yeah, like we might see them taking the hyper boost on separate laps instead of on the same lap.
To be fair, it was that was a really great ploy to pull away from the guys who were all battling behind them. So just create a bit of margin, and it was working. There were several seconds in front, and really a credit for the fact that Sims only fell down to fourth. So it probably should have won that race. He was quicker than Antonio at that point, despite trying to save more energy. So it's quite telling.
Yeah, well, and am I wrong? Because we were talking about the BMWs relative to Sam Bird, who he dropped down the order, but he had damage from the first lap collision. And do I remember correctly that Vern actually gifted him one of the cameras from his car?
That's what eRacing 365 reported. I don't think I had anyone in the team telling me as such, but I'll believe Sam when when he says that, because he really knows what he's talking about. But there was definitely a bit of damage to the side of Sam's car, and the thing, when you damage some of the bodywork on this car, it really does start to affect the drag, because the whole aero on the car is designed to cut a nice clean line through the air. It's all about aero efficiency and not really creating downforce. So if you start to damage the bodywork, it reduces your drag. It means you need to use more energy to achieve the same speed, really. And so we did see that there was at one point where he just started to plummet. It was down to sixth at one point. And I think we probably saw that as a result of that. He did say after the race as well, he felt like he was nursing a car with an issue, and that he didn't feel competitive in a straight line.
Yeah, and it's not surprising because the aero isn't. It's actually less aero in terms of downforce, but the slipperiness matters a lot when you're trying to be that efficient. If I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, exactly. It's got marginally less downforce than the old car, but who cares because they look great.
Ah, they do. And let's face it, it was not the end of the world for Virgin in the race, despite that.
No, double podium finish for them, which is incredible given that they've had less testing than everyone else. As a customer team, they're not entitled to any private testing. Audi gifted them 3 days, and then they get 3 days Valencia preseason testing as well. So for them to have gotten through, with so much less testing than everyone else, and the fact that Berta was hindered by damage, to get second and third, Frank's got his best result in Formula E in his second race for Virgin. That was really, really good. And I think the test that took place after Ad Diriyah really helped them work out the issues they had there as well.
That's good to hear. So before we so that's really good to hear. So before we head on and look at the rest, what happened once we had this incident? We had a car stuck on track and a safety car. Tell us about the end of that race.
So at this point, D'Ambrosio has really worked his way up from he was 10th on the grid, which is quite remarkable when you think about it. And he was always lurking at the back of that lead battle of about 6 cars, and just started picking them off one by one. Used the attack mode boost fantastically as well, because he took it so much later than everyone else, and actually managed to jump the Virgins in doing so. Because he was able to do the wide section to get the power boost and stay in front of them because they've been scrapping way too much. So that puts him up on the podium. And of course, when the BMWs take each other out, he's suddenly leading. And there was a bit of a delay, getting the safety car back in after that. But we had the 1 lap showdown, which was just great. And he managed to hold them off for what was a remarkable race win. His first one where he actually got to stand on top of the podium.
What I would say as well on attack mode, this race was actually a really good advert for attack mode, and why Formula E wanted to bring it in, because previously in Ad Diriyah there were a lot of mistakes from guys trying to activate it. Lopez, for one, had some problems with it, and there seemed to be some guys who were kind of almost sacrificed it because they didn't want to lose the time from going offline. But this race in Marrakesh, it seemed to work really, really well, and it threw in some really interesting strategy, especially into the second half of the race. And for some of the guys at the front, it actually made a real big difference this time.
This was exactly what attack mode was designed for. Yeah, in Ad Diriyah, didn't really like it, but here it just worked to perfection. The placement of it was great. The way it panned out, it was exactly what Formula E was looking for, and it gave us a really, really great race. Because I'm just use Daniel App as an example. He was one of the first to take it, and he picks off the 2 cars in front of him, but then his attack mode runs out and they take theirs, and then he gets picked off by both of those guys. It's creating the back and forth.
I think the positioning helped as well, because in Marrakesh, all you had to do was sort of go slightly wide, at the first corner and sweep round the outside. Whereas in Ad Diriyah, it was almost kind of quite an unnatural move to go offline, and it was quite an awkward position. And I think we're going to see some circuits this year where it's going to work really well, and others, we might get a couple of Ad Diriyahs where it really doesn't work. But I think overall throughout the season, I think it's going to be really exciting to see how drivers use it.
Well, a lot of it is going to come down to, as well, I would guess, exactly what the time penalty is for taking it. Because we saw that if you had, maybe about a second or a little bit more, you could take it and just be in front of the person who was trailing you. But it was significantly larger loss of time in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, because of the positioning of it, it was on the corner exit, which meant you not only had to sacrifice speed into the corner, but you were losing momentum all the way down that straight as well. It was a big, big loss. Here it was more just kind of on one one single corner. And maybe you lost a little on the exit as well, but it was a much smaller loss, I think. And actually where the power boost you got meant you gained time. If you weren't scrapping away so much, you were able to gain time by using it, because the circuit's got quite a lot of straights as well, so the power boost does help.
Although I like that it's a boost, but it's not, there's no extra energy reserve to call on, so you still have to manage your power throughout. So is this what we're going to see it come down to? Who can be more efficient when they have the extra power? And we'll get the most out of it. And I don't know, strategically, I still am not clear on when is the best time, or how, if there's a universal approach yet to it, kind of like we see with Formula One and pit stops, or if they're still really figuring it out as they go.
Efficiency is the name of the game in Formula. It's always going to be about who can be quickest while using the least energy. So there definitely isn't a universal time to use attack mode. It's going to depend race to race based on how many times you have to use it, how long you get it for, how big a pack are you in? Are you being held up by this car? Can you go quicker in some clean air if you give yourself a little bit of space now? Are you at the head of the pack? There's going to be so many variables in it that you have to think on the fly.
I think also what's going to be interesting is how drivers use it. Are they going to use it to build a gap? Are they going to use it to attack? Are they going to use it to try and put away and defend? Because there's actually lots of different. It's not just like Kerrs, where in Formula One where you have to be close to the guy in front, and effectively you're pretty much always using it to overtake. In Formula E, attack mode could actually be used for actually more than just attacking.
Well, I look forward to seeing them work that out on the track. So we know that Techeetah, despite the disaster in qualifying at the start of the race, they wound up having about the best finish they could have expected, given what Lauder started in 14th or 15th, and then Verne was dropped all the way down to just about dead last after the first lap.
Yeah, P5 for Verne in the end, which I think just goes to show what Rob said. Actually, do BMW have an advantage? We closed right up on them even before the safety car came out. So that's definitely very, very impressive. Lotterer actually had to come up from 20th on the grid because he made a mistake in qualifying. So what I mentioned earlier about how driver mistakes cost Techeetah on this, Andre had a part to play in that as well, and he got up to P6. So that's really, really impressive. Again, more ominous performance that I hope at some point we're going to see a proper straight fight between our leading contenders. But then, even if we think that Techeetah currently have an advantage in pace, there's so many guys that are yet to maximize their cars. Because
I think this is something that we were actually talking about the other day when we were at the circuit. It's one thing having that pace, but it's being to unlock it and being able to use it, and string the entire race together. And one thing we have seen from, even though we haven't yet seen Techeetah run at the front, we have seen that they have a very good car in traffic and they are able to overtake, and that's going to serve them well this season.
Yeah, it will indeed, because unlike other motorsports that we will not talk about too much more, overtaking is an incredibly important skill because the cars themselves run so close together. Now, we've talked about Virgin and Techeetah, and you've mentioned Audi earlier, and let's face it, aside from the BMWs at the front, it was pretty much all Audi chasing them for a while, but the Audi team, are they in a little bit of difficulty right now?
I don't think they're doing as bad as their results suggest. Obviously, you've got to remember in Algeria, Lucas was thrown out of qualifying for the power spikes issue. So for him to actually come up to 9th, I think was pretty good, especially because their car was nowhere near optimized as well. And only P7 here in Marrakesh. again, it looks quite bad. But starting from 11th, again, looks bad. But he had a water pump failure in practice that meant he didn't get a practice qualifying run in at 250 kilowatts. So he went into qualifying pretty much blind, not knowing when to brake, when to turn in, when to accelerate. And, you get it wrong. Sometimes you underdrive, sometimes you overdrive as a result. So he was able to make up a little bit of ground on that. And, he was on pace with the Virgins. He was in that lead scrap and up to fourth at one point. So the raw pace seems to be there. It's, even if the car's not fully optimized yet. And I have to say, he did get a little screwed over by the safety car because he hadn't used his second attack mode boost when it came out. And had just been passed by the Virgins and the Cheetahs at that point as well. And of course, with only one lap, you're not really going to get the benefit of attack mode fully. So there were some extra layers to the story. For Daniel, he's struggling more with the car than Lucas is, and they just need to fine tune it more to his liking a little bit. And he ended up P10, but there's more to come from them. It's all about hooking up the weekend and being able to hit the ground running.
Yeah, and I think maybe at the end of days, that's kind of what I'm getting at, is if there's a team that has that reputation of organizationally having it buttoned up, it would be Audi. They looked dominant last year, but Degrassi started 11th, finished 7th. Lauderer started 20th, finished 6th. I mean, that seems to speak to a rather large gap in performance, one direction or another.
Well, for now, yeah.
Well, of course, for now, yes.
Yeah.
All right, then. Well, why don't you wrap this up for us? Who have we not talked about that you wanted to mention that you saw there that you had some observations about?
Well, of course, we have to talk about our F1 alumni, don't we? Felipe Massa. Dear, oh dear. I feel bad for the guy. We mentioned how the Venturi powertrain was not really good on efficiency. So he was having to deal with that issue. And the powertrain change on his car before qualifying. Got to say, great job from the Venturi guys to get that done in time. And good job he was in Group 4, because otherwise he might not have made it. So that was really, really good from them. Suffering those issues in practice, it hinders your ability to prep for the weekend, and that's fair enough. And his teammate Eduardo Mortara was suffering from the same issues, although he managed to get slightly more out of it. And Van Dorn, we already mentioned, having as much luck in FE as he did in F1. But of course, we got a new ex-F1 driver on the grid this weekend, Pascal Wehrlein, making his late debut as a Formula E driver because of the Mercedes contractual issues that stopped him racing in Adria. And he may have been hit by Degrassi at the start and DNF because of suspension failure, bodywork failure, puncture, all that kind of stuff. But I got to say, his qualifying performance was mega. P7 on the grid and 0.02 of a second away from Super Pole. He feels super duper confident now after just a brief period of running, and he had two shutdowns in first practice as well, and had a delayed start to second practice. He did not have smooth running, but pace-wise, he's right on it already.
And for Wehrlein, it was over quickly. He looked so good in qualifying. We've seen Van Dorn look good in qualifying, but he didn't even finish a lap. And his rage quit on the way out of the garage was a very impressive and Verstappen-like thing, wasn't it?
Oh, I can't blame him, because he did nothing wrong. He got utterly clattered by Degrassi braking too late into the first corner. I feel for the guy, I really do, but he told me he feels super confident now. Good. And I would not be surprised. There are, so far in Formula E, we've had one driver win in his rookie season, if you exclude, people who drove in season 1, obviously. Yeah. I think that Sims is an obvious new contender for that position. Wehrlein is in the hunt for that as well. I reckon he can win a race this year.
So, so that takes us through to any other business. So, what else do we need to take out of this? And do we have any observations from the testing?
The testing. Oh wow, the testing. I mean, testing is always fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, let's. I've got a few things for any other
Okay,
business.
good.
We mentioned in the start melee that Buemi and the two Jaguars got all caught up in that. The Jaguars got damaged. So again, for Jaguar, it's a case of what could have been, because they honestly did look super quick, and Evans had a bit of a boo-boo in Super Pole as well, which was starting P6 rather than potentially a bit further up. So Buemi P8, Evans P9, PK just outside the points. So again, nice recoveries from them, but yeah, what could have been? I got to say, I feel pretty good about Nissan now. They had a really, really good race, and this is one of Buemi's best tracks of the season. So there's some positive stuff there. We mentioned Apt struggling for pace in P10. He also mentioned to me afterwards that he felt like there was something wrong with his car after about the first third of the race. He said he used attack mode, and then after he came off the attack mode, he just suddenly lost all pace, and he might have had an overheating issue as well, because they found some stuff lodged in his radiator as well. So and the trouble with, when you start overheating, you start over consuming on energy as well, and so at that point you're already down on power, and your efficiency marks are all off, and then you've got to start lifting at different points, and the way you drive is just ruined basically. Dragon Racing just outside the points on this one. I'm not at all surprised they weren't as quick as we saw in Adiria, because as soon as I saw Jose Maria Lopez in Marrakesh, I said, so are you going to be able to do this again? He went, oh no way, there's no way. So that was, I think, a consequence of the craziness that was that weekend. They lowered the floor on their car because this is like a more typical circuit compared to the other Formula E circuits, and they ended up damaging it on the curbs. So again, as we mentioned, the bodywork damage is not good for efficiency. So that probably explains where they managed to lose a bit of time there. And lastly, on Neo, still no points because there are probably a multitude of issues with that car at the moment, unfortunately. Reliability wise has been really, really poor. And, I know you mentioned the test. We know that Jamie Chadwick has been testing for them. She had incredibly limited running in Adiria, and the same thing happened to her in Marrakesh because the car just doesn't function at times. And actually, Danny Juncadella testing Van Dorn's HWA in the Marrakesh has suffered the exact same shutdown that he had in qualifying. So we're definitely seeing, a repeat of these issues. Susie Wolf was telling me actually that really, really glad we've got 3 in-season tests this year, because we kind of need them because they need to catch up and work up on their issues. And so there's definitely a bit of ground to make up for quite a lot of teams.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good call. I will tell you that I was impressed with, and have sort of followed it because I know it's just a thing, but that Tatiana Calderon came back and actually tested for DS again. I also found that to be interesting.
Yeah, she had a really good time as well, especially considering she didn't run in the afternoon. She's been really impressing. I wouldn't be surprised if she's becomes closer with the team if Formula 2 doesn't work out for her.
All right, then. Any other notes from testing?
Not necessarily. We can always mention those in the next show, I guess. But test-wise, things were quite quiet on this one.
All right. Well, then let's hand out some awards. So, Chris, who or what was your thing of the weekend?
My thing of the weekend. Oh, there's so many to choose from.
Yeah, I know.
I'm going to go with D'Ambrosio, because he drove masterfully. And it might be a bit of a cop out because he won the race, but I don't think I've seen a drive quite like that where they've managed to overcome quite a lot of ground. I mean, coming from 10th, avoiding the melee at the start, coming back through the field with some great overtaking maneuvers. The patience of a monk, to ease through the field, and the perfect strategy, and the ability to keep Robin Franks behind you under pressure on that final lap as well. Superb drive, unlike anything we've seen in Formula E.
All right, then. I think for me, and I've been thinking about it, this is actually a tough one because there was so much good racing going on. But I got to say, I think for me, BMW was the thing of the weekend. Even though they finished outside the podium, that was a very, very, very impressive performance they put on. And the ability to work, or maybe I should go BMW with a shout out to Sims, because wow, for a rookie, it was surprising to me he was able to keep up with DaCosta as well as he did, and then to have pace on him at the end. He may have something very special for this series.
Josh Covey in the chat has just mentioned that D'Ambrosio sounded like Tom Cruise talking about Katie Holmes after the race. I love Mahindra. I love Mahindra so much. I've actually, can I change my thing of the weekend to the reaction of the Mahindra team to D'Ambrosio's victory? There are going to be some major gifts coming out of that. That was amazing.
Yeah, no, I would be completely okay with that. But if we talk about the thing of the weekend, we're going to have to talk about who missed the apex. So, for you, Chris Stevens, who missed the apex at the Marrakesh E-Prix?
I'm going to go with Venturi, unfortunately, just because fundamentally there seem to be things wrong with that car that affected all four of them. And we're not seeing the potential of any of those guys, which is a shame because they all deserve to be fighting at the front.
Yeah, no, they do, and I am slightly concerned for the course of the Venturi team as they go forward, but they have a lot of resource behind them, so I presume they will get on top of their issues as the season progresses.
I wouldn't be concerned. They always knew that this year was going to be tough for them trying to compete with the manufacturers that they got in Formula E. It was always going to be tough for them. So why not take a year to kind of experiment, build, and work on a few things, and then fully launch it in season 6 or something, or maybe even slightly later, because we know they got all sorts of really great technical partnerships in the works that I'm sure at some point are going to come into a big fruition.
Yes, and there were some special guests in the paddock this weekend. But I think for me, and this is tough because, for missing the apex, the obvious answer would be Verne, because he quite literally missed it in turn 1 and vastly cost his team potential first place. But really, I think I got to go with DaCosta because it was a 1-2 that he cost them, and he missed that apex just as exquisitely as Verne did.
And it pains me to agree with that because Antonio is just one of the nicest people in the paddock. I always have such a great time talking to him. We have good laughs together. And it's the same with Alex as well. They're both really great guys, and I just was so sad to see that'll happen. I actually have another contender for who missed the apex, which is Max Verstappen, who literally hit no apexes the whole time he was in Marrakesh.
Ah, yes, that's true. And no stewards either, so we can only presume that his day of community service went without a hitch.
Yeah, he found it really valuable. Sam Bird was not impressed by the fact that they were using Formula E as the host of Verstappen's public service.
Yeah, well, they were hardly going to make him give up a Formula One weekend, were they?
I don't know. I don't know what I was expecting from this punishment, to be honest. As you know, if you want to put him on display and you want to do it before the season starts, what's the big event that's on? What big FIA event is on during this time of the year? Formula E.
Yep, it is. All right, so that leaves only one single point of business, and that is the
Comment of the week.
So you promised me you would keep track, and much like I check in on my daughter's homework, I'm going to ask, do you have any contenders for comment of the week?
I do. I have three for you. So there was Mike Doyle commenting while we were having some potential issues with the live stream and no sound was coming through. Thought maybe you guys were imitating the sound of an E-Prix. Paul Wright talking about Antonio Felix da Costa's car potentially being live after the incident. If the car is live, it should flash gold and play music. And Josh Covey with some fantastic work here. There broke the line.
Ooh, I don't know. Paul's made me laugh, but I am a sucker for a pun. So tell us, Chris, who wins this week's comment of the week?
You are talking to a fellow pun lover. It's got to be Josh Covey.
All right, congratulations, Josh Covey. You are this week's winner of
Comment of the week.
And that, of course, brings us to the time for all of the plugging. Chris, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at cstevens_journo. You can find all my written work at formulaspy.com or on ejournoonline.com, where I have a big collection of all my podcasts and all my written work. I would also like to give a shout out to Abdel Hamid, who is a listener of eRadio and was working at the circuit this weekend. It came up and said hello and told me how much he enjoyed listening to the show. So thank you so much for saying that, and I'm glad you are enjoying.
It's always fun to run into people who listen to the show and like it. And we need to say a special thanks to Rob Watts for appearing on the show, and our apologies that his internet has prevented him from seeing us through to the finish. And as for me, I'm at MattPT55 on the Twitters. Come tell me how wrong I am about all the things and how I cause all the crashes in iRacing, because I don't bother with mirrors because they make it hard to see where I'm going. And don't forget, you can catch us at eRadio Show on Twitter as well. And if you're part of our Missed Apex Slack group, there is a special Formula E channel, so please do look for it and join it. And remember, chicks dig heels, wounds cause scars, and glory is a fungible concept under certain philosophical precepts. This has been eRadio Show.